You are listening to the Dogmatic podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So, if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or his Substack. Or simply buy him a coffee with a one-off donation, links to which can be found at dotmalik.com. Now, let's get on with the show.
Right, sister. So basically, we've got to talk quickly about Angus Dalgleish, the problems with academia, and then a whole bunch of other stuff that you're an expert in.
Well, I don't know about an expert, but yeah, I'd love to talk to you about it. Stuff.
Oh, sorry, that's actually a bad word. I just called you a derogatory word. I'm so sorry. I take that back.
What did you call me?
Expert.
Oh, yeah, exactly. Yeah, we can't use that word. That's another word that's been hijacked, like vaccine and pandemic and all the other words.
Yeah. So
and
anyway,
even rainbow.
Yes, even rainbow, 100%. Good point. So I was going to say, like, there was a time when I was a junior doctor, I used to think, I want to be a professor. Professors are the best. They're the top of the game. They're the top dog. Like, you're the professor. You're like badass. And then my surgical training taught me through experience of working with many professors. Actually, professors weren't actually what I thought they were. They were like the Wizards of Oz, literally hiding behind the curtain. They were not very good surgeons. They had two left hands. For what they made up and what they couldn't do in surgery, they just blagged about it and talked about it and wrote papers about it and went on circuits being a big name, describing in the operation and this and that. But I was like shocked because I was like, you can't operate. Like, what are you talking about? And I would be there when they would ask me to do the surgery because they knew I would do a better job than they did. And I'd be like, and you're going around talking about this operation like you're an authority on it? Yeah. What the heck? So they talked the talk when they couldn't walk the walk. Yeah. I found that they fudged the numbers and altered the data. I found that they stole the PhDs and other people's research. That they never actually wrote a single paper at all. It was all down to grunts like me. And you'd be lucky if they got to review it and just check the grammar and whatnot. Yeah. They were political animals. They were beasts. They knew how to climb the greasy poles and say the right things and attend the meetings and get the promotions and get the managers on side and know how to get funding and cover up their conflicts of interest. What I'm trying to say is that's what I found professors to be. And I think that idea of the professor being this amazing, mad, genius, maverick needs to be shattered because the government and authorities and the predators used people with position of authority, like doctors, like scientists, like professors, rolled them out, like, on cue and said, right, promote the jab, promote the fear porn, because you're a professor, everyone's going to listen to you. When actually, the truth is, Ursula, we shouldn't be listening to these people. We should be listening to people, ordinary people like yourself, like Elizabeth Hart, like Michael Ginsburg, like people who've been on point from day one, like Dr. Thomas Binder, who have been consistently right. And what I find is other doctors as well in Australia, New Zealand, who have been right from day one, they're silenced. You never hear about them. They go through suspensions and law courts and all that kind of stuff. And no one talks about them. No one wants to hear their opinion. But you know what? For some reason, people want to hear about from a professor. And it's like, why?
Yeah. You've just reminded me about the circular nature of bullying. Because I forget what the word was for the bullies in the old public schools in the UK, where you'd have like prefects that were in charge, and it became tradition, right? As people got older through the school, they would become the bully and they would bully the youngsters and so on and so forth. And actually, there's definitely a parallel there to the world of academia, where we're in a situation now where the academics that are still in a job, they haven't been forced out either through the mandates or other counter-narrative trying to get the word out, or whistleblowers or whatever. They are in a situation where they've been treated by those senior academics, like Professor Angus Dalgleish that you interviewed the other day, who, I'm not accusing him of being a bully, but his generation of academics, in my experience, are often guilty of, as you say, exploiting younger PhD students and staff members in a way that can further their career and just reinforces the same narrative, in over and over again. So it's kind of a circular thing.
You sent me this picture. Can you see it? What's this about? Controlling the narrative in academia.
Controlling the narrative in academia. So this comes from an article that I got published in a journal called Propaganda in Focus that's edited by a team that includes Professor Piers Robinson, that you might know from UK Column News and other outlets.
Yeah, he's a great guy.
So I created this little image because basically it explains the kind of things that go on in academia that haven't really been put together. It's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, because this isn't new, right? People have been writing about this for many years, how corrupt and broken academia is. And there's actually a whole body of literature called critical university studies. Did you know that?
No, I
People
didn't.
don't even know. There's like critical race theory. There's critical university studies where people have been on the periphery, really, of academia. Maybe they've retired or they've been pushed out, whatever, and they've written a book or collected an edited collection about how broken academia is. And there's lots of elements of why it's broken. And sometimes there's papers that have been published over the years that just provide a case study of one element of it. So I decided to try to summarize it all, and it came out in this article a couple of years ago. And this was one of the images that I created to try and simplify it for people.
Well, you know what? Can I just say something? This is a great image. And it reminds me of the part of the conversation I had with Angus Dalgleish. I talked about his book, and the issue I had with his book was, how the hell did he manage to get a former member of head of the MI6 to write a foreword about it? The guy, Paul Goddard, or whatever his name was, his colleague, like, where's he been during COVID? Why have I never heard of him? Where did he suddenly come out from? And where did he suddenly disappear back into? And the book was mainly about science is corrupted by wokeism and political correctness. And I don't know if you remember, but in my podcast I said, but what about the corruption of academia? And he didn't answer that. And actually, I just want to say, I'm going to go back to this, but he never answered a lot of what I said. But anyway, let's move on. I mean, the thing is, some people are listening to this podcast, they can't see this image. It's brilliant. At the top, it says controlling the narrative in academia. And basically, going from bottom to top are levels of control. Now, before research is conducted, how do they control the narrative? Well, research students with academic ambitions are rejected if the topic does not, inverted commas, fit.
Yes.
Like if it doesn't fit the narrative. So if you're going to say, hey, Ursula, I've got a research project. I want to check whether polio genuinely is a great vaccine, and I'm going to compare it with a placebo, that's going to be an automatic.
That's right. Exactly right. Yes. And, it's not only that, because in countries like New Zealand, here, of course, we're very sparse population, right? So academics are low on the ground, and they are, in terms of discipline, in their specialisms. And so you're never really, a PhD is so, as you know, so specialised that it's rare that more than half a dozen academics are suitable supervisors. And so if you're already in a niche topic and you're looking for a legitimate academic supervisor, somebody who is going to be sympathetic to your topic, but not too sympathetic, like not biased, like somebody who is actually going to offer some critical thinking and some direction to your research, then already you're up against a brick wall, right? Because you can't get anywhere unless your topic already fits either an existing discipline of some kind, or it would add value to an existing academic's portfolio of publications, or it's already pinpointed by the university's marketing communications department, whatever you want to call the propaganda experts, as something that they want to promote. So that's the first hurdle in the level of control. At the low level, already there's a filter there to make sure that everybody, to some extent, conforms.
And that's going to sift out a lot of people. We need to go through this list very quickly. Do you want me to read through it very quickly, or do you want to read through it?
I'll read through it. Shall I just quickly? Then I can just add a couple of examples. Okay, so the next one up from that is recruitment filters. Only those that support the political narrative are employed. And that's basically students that often become academics through being a seminar facilitator or something. Again, at the recruitment stage, they wouldn't get any further if their existing research outputs didn't fit the narrative. And then moving up to the next level of control, we've got research and teaching duties and affiliations. And quite often, if you don't uphold the narrative in teaching a certain way through a particular lens, for instance, then you wouldn't be allowed to teach that particular cohort of students. And so instantly your reach reduces and your outputs may be reduced. And so your long-term viability at that institution is potentially reduced. And then moving up to the next level, internal funding, obviously within departments, there's funding available to apply for. And so again, if your narrative didn't fit, if your outputs or research didn't align with what they wanted, then you wouldn't get that funding approved. And same with external funding. If you don't use...
Read the whole lines, by the way, seriously, because, you know, and I know you're summarizing them, but the one before that, it's very important that people understand research and teaching duties and affiliations are withheld or revoked. So you're straitjacketed, basically. That's really important. So you're tenured, but you know what? You're not allowed to teach. You're not allowed to lecture. You're not having any grants and research anymore. So what are you doing? So you're forcing people out, but, you know, instead of sacking them, people will march out because you've straitjacketed them. So read the whole line, by the way, because it's beautiful what you've created.
Well, I mean, I've experienced this and I'm gagged, so I can't go into details like lots of academics, but I was gaslit. My students were taken away from me. My online students at one particular course, somebody came on and interfered with the online teaching simply because I had called out something that was unethical, you know, that I didn't believe in. Students were being exploited or discriminated against. And so, yeah, it's very cloak and dagger, this kind of approach. It is a type of gaslighting, coercion, bullying. It's very difficult to understand how complex and well rehearsed. You know, this isn't just an individual experience. This is well documented, well established corporate playbook that not necessarily academics engage with. This is the personnel departments, you know, human resources with their lawyers, etc. They just go through the machinery of getting rid of people that basically don't conform.
I can agree with all of this. Is why I want you to go through the list. I've seen it with my colleagues. I've even experienced it. So I was at the bottom, that research student who got rejected. So I applied for a master's and potentially a PhD. And I went with my research project idea. And it was very different from what was going on. And the professor sat opposite me and listened to me and asked me lots of questions. And they said, Ahmed, you know what? We just don't think research is going to be the best for you. It's very boring. It's very dry. But you know what? You just get on with surgery. You'll be a great surgeon and a consultant. I think you'd get really fed up with the research. And I know a rejection now might seem like something to be sad about, but looking back, you realize it was the right thing.
It's like a template, right? That's exact word for word. That is what they say to people who don't fit with their idea of, yeah.
That was me. That was a conversation they had with me.
Yeah.
Seriously. Kid you not? Right. So what about internal funding applications rejected? Right. You've done that.
Yeah.
Now, next, honestly, please read every word line for line.
The next one up is external funding is rejected or becomes unobtainable. And that is basically about, they'll say there's certain criteria, right, for applying, even at the application stage of external funding. They will say that you have to have X amount of, research outputs. They're very distinct about what kind of outputs they are, what journals they're published in. They have to be specific journals. And yeah, I mean, it's very contrived, right? So a lot of this stuff, if you've been through it before, it's like jumping through the hurdles, right? They'll know exactly how to word things, how to set the budgets out, what names to put on the application form. That's the other thing. I mean, that's something that somebody like Professor Dalgleish will be used for, and he'll recognise that power that a lower level, in inverted commas, academic will say, Professor, would you mind if we put your name on this funding application for Carnegie Institute or Rockefeller or Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation funding? because they know that his name is instantly recognizable. He's got a large list of academic outputs that are published in the right places, that tick the right boxes, etc., etc. So if you haven't got any of those connections or those outputs or that social media little brownie points, it's a no-go.
Yeah, I was going to say, so exactly, if you apply for a grant to the Wellcome Trust or Bill and Melinda Gates or the Gavi Foundation, whatever, if you're not pro their narrative, pro climate change, pro vaccine, pro LGBTQ+, you won't get the funding. It's just not going to happen. And about the names and how basically there's the prostitution of names of individuals and institutions in the field of science. Like Oxford University and Imperial College, their names are now prostituted out because companies and corporations know that if they've got those institutions advocating or recommending what they want, it's more likely the public will take it. So basically they prostitute these, and so these places will take the money. And we know about that.
Yeah,
and also
exactly
about
right.
the prostitution of individuals is just like you've just said. People said they want a research grant or they want to publish a paper, and you're a low level, academic person. So you go up to someone like Peter McCullough and say, I've got this cardiology research and that I'm doing, and I want to publish a paper. Do you mind having a look at it and joining on board? Can I have you as one of the authors? So when people say, I'm the most cited person and I've the most published, I laugh and guffaw because there's no way they've written all that, and there's no way they've done all the research. So they're running a busy private practice, they're teaching and lecturing, running educational courses, lots of operations or consultations, and they're writing a gazillion papers, and they're traveling the world doing conferences. No, they're lying, because you can only do one or two. And look after your family and hold your marriage together. No, it ain't happening. So people are most cited, in my experience, again, in the world of surgery. I'm not saying about any named individual out there. Their name was just added on, and they're like happy to. They're like, yeah, great, I'll have a look at your paper. Great, yeah, that looks great. And it's just another publication they can add to their CV. Anyway, just telling you.
You're absolutely right. Two things. You're absolutely right. The critical university studies, that is an established fact. So it's not just your discipline. That happens across the board. That there are multiple examples of, I was involved in that years ago, where I saw, and I was effectively writing academic papers that were already published, and we were just swapping words around and resubmitting them to another journal and getting them through. It was virtually the same thing, right? It was just plagiarizing your own work, just to tick a box, to get another output published in an impact factor journal that, ticked that box, and that meant that you could apply for XYZ funding. And the other thing that, I wanted to pick up on what you've just said about applying to people like Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, etc., is that there are multiple layers, right? That's part of, they're very clever, these people, right? The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, as I think maybe we'll talk about that another day, the impact factor issue. But the trickle-down effect of the funding that comes from big institutions, multi-million-dollar institutions like the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, and goes to another so-called philanthropic, what Margaret Anna Alice calls a philanthropaths institute, and then that goes to another so-called philanthropathic institute. And so whoever you're applying for may not be, on the surface, it may not look like something that is underwritten by Big Pharma or Big Chem or whatever. But actually, if you dig deep enough, you will find that that's where a majority of their funding comes from.
Yeah. So can I give you another example? I had a professor once, and we were doing research about a certain thing. And in return for that research, they were getting a grant for special facilities at the hospital, quite several £1 million worth. And when I was just doing the research, I found that this procedure wasn't doing great. It was like 50% of cases where it was viable, and 50% of them were like very poor results. And I left and moved on to another job. I was hoping that my name would be on this paper. And, a year later, the paper's published and my name's not on it. And I was like, what? What have I done? Instead of 50% good results, it was suddenly like 85% good results. And I knew that was BS because the study had stopped, and it was all about collecting data. and writing it up, and I'd collected all the data. So it's not like suddenly I missed something. And what they did was the scoring system, like say you got a scoring system out of 100, you needed to hit like 80 points to get to be good. So they just fudged the scoring system so that if you were even like 55 or 60 out of 100, then that was termed a good result. So they just moved literally the goalposts.
That's right. That's what we call grey science. That's what we call grey science.
I'm not on the paper. And I was shocked. And like, these are all big people, and the professor's really big. And I don't know what to say. I was a very lowly doctor at the time. I was just shocked. And then basically that doctor went on to become, the top dog in the hospital, then, positions in the society, the National Society, Association. And I'm telling you right now, these people, these political animals, I found that with research, what I found was it wasn't the pursuit of truth and science and a real advancement. It was the pursuit of career advancement, making yourself a bigger name, getting positions of power and becoming positions of authority. And it was ego-driven. Anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why when you had that long chat with David Charadambos, he emphasizes the importance of ego, because that is what motivates these people. It's entirely about maintaining appearances and keeping up that appearance of being a senior academic, and that's more important to them than anything, especially seeking truth. Yeah, it's pretty sad.
Tell me about grey science.
Yeah, that was one of the reasons why, and I wasn't awake from the beginning, by the way. What you said earlier wasn't entirely true. I wasn't there from day one. I was certainly questioning it, but I didn't know the extent of the fraud until a few months in. But one of the things that did wake me up to the fraud was the work that I'd done as an environmentalist, as we've spoken about before, with the aerial poisoning of New Zealand. And one of the major things that made me aware of that was when I went to look at the science, and I saw exactly what you described, that the research itself was flawed, the methodology was flawed. Sometimes the findings didn't match the conclusion, or they'd left out specific things, or they'd written a conclusion that was based on something that wasn't published, right? You'd look at the references. This is unique to New Zealand, by the way, pretty much. You'd look at the references, and one of the important references would be personal communication. And I would go, what? Like, hang on a minute. You can't base what you call a fact on personal communication. It has to be peer-reviewed academic literature. But no, in the case of aerial poisoning, it's pretty much, that book about vaccines, Turtles All the Way Down?
Yeah.
That kind of idea, So somebody starts with an idea and they claim that it's true, and then they'll publish something else that's based on that, and so on and so forth over decades. We're now 70 years into this aerial poisoning in New Zealand, and it's basically a house of cards. It's entirely false, based on an entirely made up grey science, personal communication bullshit. Excuse my French, but it is total nonsense.
Okay. So, I think, what is that, 1080? What was that?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
I remember now. I remember.
Yeah, it's one of our earliest conversations.
Yeah. Right, listen, so next, application for promotion has declined.
Yes, so basically all of the below things, right, all of the issues in terms of the research needing to be conducted, if you haven't achieved your research outputs, it's publish or perish is the phrase that they use in academia. If you haven't published that good quality, in inverted commas, research, then basically you can't apply for promotion. And so when it comes to the end of your contract, you might be on a 0 hours contract as a lowly academic. That's it, basically. They've got an excuse to get you gone if you don't fit.
And can I, before you go to bullying and harassment, just another thought that crossed my head, Ursula. When it came to, again, the field of surgery and professors and whatnot, what I found crazy, right? I grew up in Glasgow, was born in Glasgow, and my mum talked about meritocracy quite a lot. She didn't use the word meritocracy, but she talked about being the best. And she said, in this country, and my dad, they both said that, look, it doesn't matter about your colour or your religion or whatever. Look, just be the best, and you will find yourself go upwards.
Yeah.
And that's how this country rewards you. In Pakistan, it's not like that. It's about who you know. It's about the money you pay someone. and it's so corrupt. And they would give me examples of family members of theirs that were turned down for jobs and positions in the government and whatnot, purely because they didn't give enough bribes, basically. And they said, you don't need to worry about that here. What you do here is just be the best. So I was like, great. And that's what I genuinely believe. But then I got to a point where I needed to apply for consultant jobs. And I just found the doors being slammed in my face. I wasn't getting shortlisted. And I actually had a consultant tell me, you're not going to get into this hospital or that hospital because my colleagues, because they knew what specialty I wanted to do, are threatened by you. Yeah. They know that you're better with patients, you're funny, you've got a great personality, you're a terrific surgeon, and you're going to be a threat to them, and you're going to show them up, and you're going to take their private practice. So you're not going to get a look in, Ahmed. And I'm telling you this because I experienced the same problem myself. And I don't want you to feel dejected and as if it's a problem with you. It's actually not. It's the opposite. It's because you're too good. Yep. And that when that guy told me that, I was like, what? Because at the time I just thought I had the junior doctor mindset. I'm a nobody. I'm this bottom fish. Here are all the sharks and predators up there. And who am I? So when this guy is saying that you, little Nemo, are a threat to the hammerhead shark, I kind of thought, like, what are you talking about? But he was right. He was right. Now, when it comes to academia, I think it's the exact same. The professors look down and they go, I don't want this guy coming up because he's going to be a threat to me and my reputation. Or this lady coming up, like they're going to show me up for who I'm going to appoint someone a little bit dumber, stupid, more corrupt than me that I can control and handle and won't be a threat to me. But the problem is, if you do this over the decades, it's just a spiral downwards in quality. So what you find is maybe 100 years ago, you had some people with honor and integrity and true scientific curiosity. But now what we've just done over the last 100 years through this bizarre system is just created gunk. And that's why I have so much contempt for people in academia, and that's my position.
Totally. I mean, you'll know that book that was written by the editor of the Lancet, was it? Marcia Angle. I mean, that was 20 years ago. The book that says, what was it called? The Truth About the Drug Companies, How They Deceive Us and What to Do About It. Just spelling out how corrupt Big Pharma is. But she does say in that book that a big part of it is the corruption of academia. That was 20 odd years ago she wrote that. And there's only been more and more evidence since. And yet it's just been swept aside. It's been ignored. And it's not a coincidence. That's being deliberately censored from the people's awareness, I think.
Yeah.
Over the years.
100%. Send me the link for that book afterwards. Right, let's talk about bullying and harassment strategies.
So bullying and harassment strategies are deployed. Yeah, so this is very, very strategic. And it's the strategies that I'm talking about are listed in, there's a retired professor, Brian Martin, who used to be at the University of Wollongong, Australia. I think he's a Palm by birth, but he's written a lot. He was the chair for Whistleblowers Australia for many years, and he's written lots of books, but one book in particular is about the corporate playbook, which is based, of course, on Big Tobacco's strategies, right? How they manipulated the market, how they kept the narrative alive through academia and media and propaganda. And also, the individuals concerned who were the whistleblowers, how they dealt with them. There was a very precise way of trying to defame them, discredit them, accusing them of crimes they didn't commit or whatever, harassing them, gaslighting them, you didn't turn up at such and such a meeting. Well, you didn't tell me there was a meeting. Oh, well, didn't you get the email? Well, no, you didn't send me an email. No, we did send you the email. You just didn't turn up. So that's another black mark, that sort of thing. And in academia, it'll be around probably students' work. Like if you've got a student whose work has got to go and be moderated by another academic, that work will get some sort of black mark against it because somehow they can discredit your work because of basically the student's work becomes a scapegoat in some ways. So there's all kinds of strategies that are deployed. And again, that's been written about at length in lots of books that I can provide you with a list of. But if you look on Amazon, Critical University Studies, you'll find lots of examples of evidence of that being deployed against lowly academics who perhaps don't know how cutthroat and corrupt the system is. Yeah. So the top one there is across the board in terms of before, like critical university studies is the body of literature. So
you can tell me that later. So on the right now column, it says after research is conducted, how you control the narrative.
That's right. This is where it gets interesting. And this was prompted actually by Professor Norman Fenton's post on YouTube. He did a little short post about how appalled he was that he not only had been targeted, but that actually some of his research had been rescinded from publication and other, journal articles have been cancelled or revoked or whatever. So this is research that's been conducted and how they actually prevent it from getting out there into the academic articles. So at the lower end of the censorship, there is what we call suppression or termination clauses. And this is a quite closely guarded secret, right? I didn't know too much about this until I read a paper by an Australian colleague who's now sadly passed. But suppression and termination clauses in funding contracts prevent explicit publication of outcomes that run contrary to the funder's objectives. For example, abstracts of some articles contradict the body of the paper. So if you've got an outcome and it goes against the contract, bear in mind the academics, right, won't necessarily be the ones that are signing the funding contracts. That will be done by another department in the university, the research funding department, whatever you call them. So the academic themselves may not be aware. They might be a bit naive. They might think, oh, I've got this groundbreaking research, findings, and I want to get it out there. So they've spent time putting the research together, and then it has to go through the research office in order to tick the box in terms of the funding, the money, because there'll be money coming and going into the university from the funder. But if that research doesn't actually fit the criteria of the original contract, then that's it. It doesn't go any further. It can't actually be agreed to be published either in the report of the funder or in the university's outputs or anything else. Does that make sense?
Yep.
So some of those termination clauses are literally instant. Like, that's it. That's the end of the research. If anything comes out that is contrary to what is required by the funder in terms of you've got to give me this in order for this money, that's it. It's over.
And this is, again, something I saw quite a lot, the research bias. Like, instead of going in and doing a research project to say, what's the truth? What is the reality? It's like, this is what we believe. This is what we want to believe. Actually, this is what we want to believe. Let's do a research project that will confirm this.
Exactly.
And if we get an alternative result or outcome, well, let's just bin that and ignore it and let's move on to something else.
Yeah.
And you can see that research bias in the publications in journals.
Yeah.
More often than not, you'll see papers that go, we have done this study which shows that this happens. What you never see really is a paper that goes, we did this study and you know what? Actually, our experience is this doesn't happen.
Yeah.
You don't hear that negative kind of like outcome.
No.
Or we proved that this doesn't work. It's always like, oh yeah, the latest blood pressure medication does work and it's been very successful and it doesn't have... You never hear, oh, we did this study and actually the blood pressure medication doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's actually associated with serious adverse events. It should be binned. You don't get that research. That doesn't get published.
I mean, I just revisited a Substack post that I did a couple of years ago about this subject where I read a press release about, I mean, I'm sorry to harp on about the poisoning again, but it's a great example where the press release said how wonderful, safe and effective 1080 aerial poisoning is, because we've proved that over 10 years in this area compared to a non-poisoned area, that native bird life is thriving, right? And I'm thinking, hang on a minute, is there anywhere that they can do that comparison in New Zealand? Because remember, this has been going on for 70 years, right? There are no placebo, there's no control group, a bit like the COVID scenario. Everyone basically got entered into this experimental situation. So when I looked at the actual cited so-called academic literature, I find that it wasn't actually a control area that they compared it against. It was just another forest that had been poisoned previously. It just hadn't been poisoned that particular year. It had been done 3 or 4 years earlier.
I'm not surprised. It's like vaccine. Yeah, it's like vaccines. Yeah. It's like we're going to compare the latest vaccine with the older version of the vaccine.
That's
and
right.
You're like, what? Yeah. That's not a placebo saline shot. How do you know?
Yeah.
And then their excuse is, the reason why is because it would be unethical not to give children their vaccine. And you're like, what the?
Yeah.
What?
I mean, this is the same. This is the same argument that they use for the aerial poisoning. They'll say, no, it's not fair on the native species not to poison this area because otherwise the pests are going to come in and annihilate the native species. It's just a total nonsense. It's flipped on its head. This ethics and this robust academic literature is just totally flawed. It's incredible, really, what they've managed to do.
They're great at talking the talk, and when you read the medical ethics wording, and it all sounds great, and it sounds like they're there to protect the patient, and it's all done properly. It's all just a smoke screen. It's all lip service. It's all to give this veneer that it's been done properly. But the corruption and the lies are so deep, and that's why I am very critical of research. Right, next one. Potential publications are accepted by peer review, but editor requests second round outright rejection. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so this was something that Professor Norman Fenton highlighted, where he had been through a robust peer review process. Bearing in mind, this can sometimes take years, right? I've had an article that's taken over a year to get through this ridiculous voluntary peer review process where you do the adjustments, it gets resubmitted, you do more adjustments because that peer reviewer can't review it again, etc. Anyway, he's got to a point where he'd actually got it accepted, it was okay to publish, and then suddenly the editor emails to say, oh, actually, I'm just going to send it out to another peer reviewer because I'm still not quite sure about it. And it's like, hang on, what? And then, of course, inevitably at that point, that new peer reviewer says, no, that's it. It's an outright rejection, which is crazy, right? Because you've already been through, you wasted so much time and effort. It's just ridiculous.
It's just like, we never screened you out, got rid of you the first time round. Well, let's just do it now. Let's just knock you off.
Yes, yeah. So the next stage of the censorship would be potential publications are rejected by the editor without even going to peer review. And this is interesting because years ago, you used to be able to just email your submitted paper to an editor. But now, of course, 9 times out of 10, you have to go through an online platform, which is multiple journals under one platform. And so you'll submit it online. And because maybe the AI has picked up a keyword that it doesn't quite like, that's counter-narrative, it'll instantly be rejected without even going to peer review or going to the editor.
A joke. Right. Potential publications rejected from preprint servers before peer review. What does that mean?
You might be aware of platforms like the one I belong to is academia.edu. There's also researchgate.com, I think it is. And so I've actually deleted my ResearchGate profile now because I didn't agree with this censorship. But yeah, Professor Norman Fenton was saying that he'd actually had preprints of papers that were on ResearchGate deleted or in some way shadow banned or censored. And that's unheard of before COVID. So it's something that's a draft paper, hasn't been submitted yet, open to interpretation or feedback or whatever, and it's not even allowed to be effectively in an open source, open audience kind of environment.
So people can see it. I find the next one shocking. Past publications related to the political narrative but with opposing conclusions subsequently withdrawn by editors. Can you give any examples of that one?
Yeah, so again, this was something that came up in Norman Fenton's post, that if something had already been published, because it was related to something that was counter-narrative, then the editors had decided no, they were going to revoke it. So it had already been effectively published in a journal, but trolls or whatever, somebody in a position of power had then written probably to the editor and said, oh no, I don't agree with XYZ in this published paper, can you revoke it? And they've actually revoked it after publication, which was very, very rare prior to the COVID era. Very rare.
Wow. Okay.
I mean, normally that sort of thing would only happen if the author was later found to have a massive conflict of interest that they didn't declare, or, you know, some other fraud had happened, something like that, but not for no logical reason. And then even worse than that was actually unrelated past publications by the author. So such things that are totally not related to, they weren't necessarily counter-narrative, they were just anything that author had published in the past suddenly became targeted, and then they were withdrawn. So basically memory hold, the Orwellian term memory hold, just anything that you've done in the past suddenly disappears because they don't want people to. I mean, that adds to the point before that we were talking about in terms of discrediting and defaming, lowering their self-esteem. If somebody hasn't got those past publications, then it contributes to a reason for the institution to try and get rid of you. So adds weight to that. Yeah. So then the highest level of control I've put across both levels of before and after research is conducted is that workload is manipulated. There's a fake disciplinary, maybe at a kangaroo court. They've already decided what the outcome is, all about that, Ahmed. And then they're managed out. So they'll have some sort of disciplinary system. They'll accuse you of doing something that you didn't do. And then they'll say, right, take this money, sign on the dotted line and never talk about this again. And off you go.
Wow. Look how murky and dirty academia is. Wasn't there a quote by Henry Kissinger about academia? Wasn't there?
Remind me?
Oh, I need to find it. But there definitely was, by the way. And let me just find it.
But this has been going on for years, like decades. It's just incredible that nobody has really, in terms of the legacy media, this hasn't really been a subject of conversation before or hasn't been addressed.
Yeah, I found it. The reason that university politics is so vicious is because stakes are so small.
Yep.
So going back to the Angus Dalgleish podcast, I've had mixed reviews.
Have you?
Some people have been like, Ahmed, he's an old man. Why did you give him, an old man such a hard time? I've had, Ahmed, one person said, oh, Ahmed, you're so patronizing to him. I've had lots of people say, why can't he answer a straight question? Like, why did he deflect every question you sent to him? That was weird. Someone emailed me and say he's giving intelligence scripted responses. He's trained in the dark arts. He's an operative. Literally, and he had an email. The way he deflected your answers and went back to talking points, RFK, Wuhan Lab, China, Big Bad China. It was like talking points. You're clearly making him uncomfortable. Blah, blah. I had another person write to me and say, this is classic operative training to appear naive and bumbling when it's all crafted to give that illusion to basically squirm out of a difficult spot. So I had a real mixture of responses from he's amazing, he's a hero, to oh my God, he's not a good guy.
Yeah.
But the reason why I was frustrated is because I did ask him multiple straight questions and he just didn't answer them.
Yeah.
And my response to be, but why? Why didn't you just answer my goddamn question? And it's like, how can it be that you're a professor and highly intelligent and an authority figure in this so-called movement, but at the same time, you're bumbling, naive, got massive blind spots, and have consistently got a track record of making mistakes and then doing complete U-turns about it? Like, which one is it? Like, pick one. You can't be both. And, I talked about how are you still in your position where you've got your job and you've got this and that and you haven't been censored. I got told by another doctor who knows Angus, and I don't know if this is true or not, but apparently Angus confided with him and said that dear love reached out to him. I think he was head of London University at the time, and said, don't worry, Angus, we're going to protect you. You won't lose your job for speaking out. So why did he get that protection? What's that all about?
Yeah.
And it's not just that. It's about the fact that why did a consultant in oncology write articles for the Daily Mail? Or why did the Daily Mail approach him and take telephone interviews and write articles telling millions of people to take the jab? And if Angus was coerced into doing that, and I think he said to me, I was coerced into coercing others. Why didn't he kick up a stir and a fuss? Why didn't he reach out to the GMC and complain? Why didn't he complain why didn't he sue the Daily Mail? I mean, he got paid for those articles, and I just, where's the anger and frustration? And there's so much more. I don't know. What was your take on it? Very quickly, and then let's move on.
I think it's complex. I think there is definitely some ego there. There's definitely some cognitive dissonance. In terms of the Daily Mail thing, it's worth saying that the university comms department, I've written about the University of Canberra doing this. You know, this grey science, that is their remit. That's what they do. They publish grey science, and they'll get brownie points for the university's funding to put experts, in inverted commas, like the professor into the media spotlight, you know, and basically he's like a puppet. He's got to perform, otherwise the university loses out. And you've got to remember that somebody at that stage of their career, the university is all they've ever known, right? That is their professional and personal identity, all of their networks, their connections. He's probably got a son and a grandson or granddaughter or whatever who have also gone through the university system. They are absolutely 100% invested, believing that is the best thing for them and for humanity to go through a university education. And
yes,
it's incredibly difficult to face up to the reality of you know what's happened to academia over the last few years. I mean, I can bet that somebody like Professor Dalglish doesn't even know that the book that I've just sent you the link to in the chat there, Toxic University, I bet he doesn't even know that book exists, along with all the other books along with it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I asked him about lots of things, and he kept saying, I don't know. And
yeah. I mean, he does know. Obviously, he does know, right? Because we're 5 years into this, and so he would have done a little bit of research into the things that you asked him about, but he probably was briefed before. He would have had to have rung his legal department, legal advisor at the university and said, look, this is what I'm planning to do. And they would say to him, right, okay, that's fine. We'll okay that because you can't do it without their permission. And they would have said, right, just make sure that you stick to these topics. You don't stray, blah, blah, blah. And that's what he does. He's used to it. He's been doing it all his life, probably.
Because some people might think he was, just naive and bumbling and an old man. I think he was very deft and very good at what he was doing. He was excellent. Just, deflecting everything. So, I said to him, what do you think about the childhood vaccines now? You're talking about mRNA vaccines. And I said, look, would you give your children or grandchildren? I said, give me a direct answer. He never gave me a direct answer.
No, he can't.
And he said, well, some of them.
Yeah.
And I was like, which ones?
Yeah.
Didn't answer.
No,
Didn't answer.
He can't answer. He's legally not allowed to, the comms and legal department of his university, unless he wants to. I mean, the disclaimer, I'm lucky. Nobody employs me.
He should have said that. I'm gagged, and if I want to keep my position, Ahmed, I can't talk about these issues. Do you know what? He's allowed to say that.
Yeah, he is. And he might say that at some point. It might come to that. But at the moment...
what I'm saying is that would mean a lot to me.
Yep.
Because then to say, I don't know, and I haven't really looked into that science and stuff. You've had 5 years now.
Yeah.
And you haven't had time to look up what literally can take you half an hour to go for it. So I've got Ignored Science coming back on the live stream next week on Tuesday. And he's going to talk about vaccine harms, autism. And he was saying, I watched that podcast. And I can tell you, you need half an hour. And even on PubMed, with their research, with their corrupt science, you can take the whole thing apart. And he goes, why can I do that? And someone who's a professor can't. It's just...
Yeah.
Okay, fine. So anyway, moving on,
yes.
We're going to talk about some other stuff. Now, you sent me another picture. What's this all about?
What is this all about? Yeah. So I know we're going to talk about this maybe another day, but I just wanted to link this to the academic corruption issue because it's a big part of it.
Can you describe it? Because remember, a lot of people can't see this screen. So literally describe what we're looking at.
Yeah, so it's like a wheel, right? It's just another circle, a cycle, a bit like the bullying cycle, but more focused on the funding. And so it's connected to the universities because the public-private partnerships that a lot of the universities are now, they have, arms of the university that aren't entirely government funded. They're commercial enterprises. And so they are seeking funding partly from government maybe, but also from commercial enterprises in order to attack a problem, right? You've well rehearsed this in your previous podcast, Ahmed. It's about creating the illusion of a problem. Like today we're faced with the bird flu nonsense, right? And so they research this supposed problem and then they come up with a solution. How does that cycle actually work? This is a little diagram that I've used to try to describe what I mean by the impact investment cycle. So what is impact investment? It's an investment that is strategically about something that's been measured that isn't necessarily measurable, but they've invented a way to measure it, right? This is about commercialization of education, for instance. So, you can't necessarily measure learning, right? You can't go into a classroom and say, right, all the kids in this classroom, they've all got little light bulbs above their head. That means that, tick the box, they've all learnt something today. You can't do that, but you can invent some sort of measurement to create the idea that XYZ learning there has been an outcome that is measurable. And so this impact investment is entirely based on inventing ways to measure something, presenting it as if it's hard data, even though it's theoretical and open to interpretation. And that creates a way of encouraging funding into a certain area that might need some investment. And then also creating a way of saying, oh, this investment has really worked. It's fantastic. The outcomes of this measurable, totally not measurable, but it's been measured and we've got the outcomes that are positive. And so that grows the investment cycle. It's just propaganda and a very clever way of constructing a narrative that looks, because people look at figures, right? And they'll see that, especially if they're looking for a financial investment, they'll look at a figure and they'll think, we've increased the test results of a language assessment by 60%. Oh, fantastic. And we'll put this intervention in and suddenly it's gone up to 80%. Oh, that was really worthwhile investment. But actually it's totally arbitrary because the test itself isn't valid and it might have had all kinds of other interpretations, but they've just swept that aside because the methodology isn't relevant and isn't looked at closely enough because of these biases that we just talked about in the academic literature. It's just totally flawed.
Well, you did a great job. Great job. Honestly, with this image, the impact investment cycle, and you're right, it's about manufacturing consent to invest and spend money, much of it taxpayers' money, on stuff that isn't required, basically, and justifying it. And then they, and people, and you get lost in the grass, in the long grass. You get lost in all the data and all the information, which is all just fake. It's all fake.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
It's fake.
We might come back to talk about this, but one of the biggest impact investors is Legatum, who is busy in London at the moment, as we know, with the ARC conference with Jordan Peterson and the crew.
You're coming back, though, on the show with Michael Ginsberg, and we'll talk about ARC then, and you're going to set the same scene about ARC and who they are, and Michael will talk about, what the actors have said. It's funny, I was speaking to Nick Hudson last night. He's just had a baby boy.
Oh, wow, baby boy. That's amazing.
Yeah. Now 3 days old. Very, very cute. But he went to ARC, last year, and I was like, all right, okay, what was that like? And he said it was very disappointing. And I was like, in my head, I was like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. I mean, I could have told you that. But anyway, I'm glad he said he was disappointed. He said it was full of neocons and it wasn't what I thought it would be. And it was very disappointing. The good thing was meeting other people at the coffee stops, and chatting with other people. But the people who were speaking, it was all very disappointing.
Yeah.
And I think the lineup this year is even more fascinating. I mean, the funny thing is, if someone invited me, I don't think I'd ever be invited. I'm not the kind of person they'd want to invite. And that's why I think it's very interesting, the kind of people they do invite. I think that in itself is a bit of a tell. One, I don't think I would go even if I was invited. And two, I wouldn't ever pay a ticket to go because I know what it is and it's just fake. But anyway, we'll talk about that another time.
We will, right? But I just wanted to mention it because it is very closely connected to academia. Now, this is the way that they control the narrative, these impact investment banks who are providing the funding and heavily the revolving doors of the chief execs of these commercial companies are also involved in high levels in universities. And so you scratch your back and I'll scratch mine, kind of, whatever it is. It's just, it's totally corrupt.
Well, talking about funding, what the hell is going on at UK Column? Now, you've just written a piece I love Debbie Evans. She's been on my show quite a few times now. God bless her. Like, she was my link to UK Column. I just love her. She's so passionate about what she does, about health. I mean, she did a beautiful podcast with me about what nursing used to be like when she was a nurse in the 70s and 80s. It was, really nostalgic walk back in time. And, it wasn't all perfect then, but it was so much better than what we have now. And so I love her. I love her and I trust her. And the message coming out of UK Com is very different from what she's telling me privately. And it's just very sad. Talking about funding, where's this funding of this Hong Kong firm?
Yeah.
Kind of crazy.
So we're still waiting for a proper response to that query that Richard Jeffs highlighted, that there was a change in shareholders and that the IMS, is it called? Market Access Limited. Don't know who they are. They're based in Hong Kong. Firm. Yeah. So don't know anything other than that. Yeah, it's just a little bit concerning because, of course, I've seen other, this is a similar pattern where an independent media platform, I'm not saying this has happened to UK Column, by the way, but it's just something to be aware of, that a investment bank has come along. They've managed to infiltrate an area, maybe through the merchandising or supplements. I know something that's close to your heart is people maybe exploiting the health supplements market with less than good quality products. Whatever it is, they might infiltrate a certain media platform, and from there they can potentially manipulate the content or the people that present the content or other elements of that platform. So I think it's something to be aware of. I'm paranoid now. We're 5 years into this craziness, and I've seen, look at what happened to TNT. I don't know what's happened there. It disappeared, and there was all kinds of, Sonia Poulton did a very good post about her experiences there, where there was some censorship happening and elements of control of content that she wasn't happy with, etc. I think, that's a common experience.
GB News is full of ex-Tory, what the hell?
GB News, remember, is owned basically by that Legatum Impact Investment Bank that we just mentioned. So Unheard, GB News, and the Reform Party, they're all part of the same PR machinery that is looking like it's going to be a government coup in the UK, to be honest.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's going to be at least a reform conservative coalition.
Yeah, whatever conservative means now. The Legatum have sort of set themselves up as some kind of new type of conservative party.
Yeah, absolutely. By the way, going back to UK Column, am I able to read out the email that Charles sent you?
No, I don't think that's a good idea.
Okay, fine. But the thing is, can I mention the fact that you asked him about the funding and he just dodged it?
Yeah.
The way he dodged it was, again, that just expert way of just totally ignoring the question. Why can't they answer the question?
Yeah.
Who is this company? What did they invest? Why are they involved with you? What was going on there?
Yeah. And if it was something innocent, like the merchandise or the health supplements or whatever, why not just say it? But obviously it's not as simple as that. The problem that you've got, Ahmed, is, we are the shareholders in a way, because I'm still a subscriber to UK Column, right? Well, why would somebody who's taking our money not be totally transparent about who their shareholders are? And a change in shareholdership, why? It just doesn't make sense to break down that trust, especially UK Column have been going for 20 years. It's a very sensitive time. People are very careful and skeptical and even paranoid. And so why would you risk that? It doesn't make any sense.
It doesn't.
No.
It's all a bit strange.
Time will tell. We'll see. And I wish Debbie all the best. I don't know. A big question for me is, the only reason I tuned into UK Column really was to hear the latest about the MHRA and Dame June Rain's accountability and all of that. So who's going to cover that content now? I don't know who would have that expertise to step forward with that. So
exactly.
She's needed.
She is very much needed. Well, I'm going to be helping her set up her own Substack and podcast.
Fantastic.
And the podcast doesn't have to be, she has a guest. She could just be giving a monologue as if she's giving a news desk.
Fantastic.
So I'm going to be showing her how to do that. And
Fantastic.
hopefully
Yeah.
she
And
will
I
be...
can certainly help her on Substack too by sharing her content and
Absolutely.
stuff. Yeah.
Talking about Substack, I think you should have a bigger platform as well and readership like Elizabeth Hart. So just while we're at it, what's your Substack called?
Informed Heart on Substack.
It's very easy.
So it's got lots of meanings, but it's basically a book written by a psychologist who is connected to the propaganda during World War II. So yeah, you can read all about it at my Substack. I publish every week. I try and make it short. I know that people have got a short time to spend reading these things, but it's almost always based around Official Information Act requests that go into either New Zealand government or connected to UK government. This week's was different, obviously, because I had the independent alternative news potentially captured not only UK column news, but our own New Zealand independent radio station, which has come under the spotlight recently for changing its format and asking for people's email addresses rather than being able to openly share the content like we used to. Yeah, so I don't know what's going on there, but no doubt we'll find out in time.
Oh, okay, fine. What other topics did you bring to the table that you wanted to cover today?
I wanted to mention the New Zealand Teachers Speaking Out with Science group. These were the teachers in New Zealand who were mandated out of their jobs. And I know, you mentioned it when you were talking to Elizabeth Hart, I think it was earlier. I listened to you talking to her about the mandates and how they almost got into the UK. Almost, not quite. But obviously here in New Zealand, they were legislated. The nurses and the border workers, prison officers, teachers, a whole raft of public sector workers basically came under the vaccination order. Yeah, and it's a pretty traumatic time. We didn't realise, here we are, 3 years now later, we didn't realise how long running the trauma would be and how there's a lack of accountability still. Just a total denial, really, that whole thing even happened. So we've done a little survey. And I had a bit of fun trying to get it through the independent New Zealand Aotearoa Ethics Committee, Research Ethics Committee, because the chief guy said that basically this was a biased set of questions, that they were leading questions because it was obviously aimed at teachers who had been mandated out. And I think he had a problem accepting that group of our society even existed. So that was a bit of cognitive dissonance that I had to overcome. But we got there eventually. So I've got research ethics approval, and we've launched a survey of 30 odd questions online that's gone out to the teachers and anybody else who is connected to the education sector who feels that they want to share their experience of the COVID era and what they're going through now. Have they managed to get back to their jobs? If so, where are they working? How do they feel about it? How did it affect their family life, their mental and physical health? Those kinds of questions. And already we've got some significant responses that are heartbreaking to read. Yeah, so I don't know if you want to hear a couple of the quotes that I've taken from the survey. They're anonymous, obviously.
Yeah, of course. Just very quickly. So how many teachers are there in New Zealand? It's not a big country, 5 million people. And what percentage lost their jobs?
Well, this is sort of an unknown area, really. It was never really documented. Lots of people, some of the teachers took early retirement. Some were forced basically to give their resignation. So they didn't really count as a firing as such. They were just bullied so much that they just, put up their hands and said, right, I'm out. Other people, they managed to ride the wave because they might have taken sick leave, paid leave, holiday, whatever they could, work from home for a bit, etc., until the mandates were lifted. It was, it was a term and a half, I think it was, while these were in place. And remember, it was a small amount of people that didn't comply. We don't know, as I say, I don't know how many people didn't comply, but it might have been just 1 or 2 at each school. And so they were bullied, harassed, and then ostracised. And people just, the teachers that were left behind basically just pretended that none of that had happened. They just went on pretending that everything was fine.
Yeah, well, the thing is, I know what it was like because, yes, mandates did come into the care workers. It was threatened, the public health, the NHS workers, but it wasn't. That was a lie that the government said it was the NHS frontline workers. It wasn't. It was anyone working in healthcare. And there's private healthcare, there's GP practices, there's clinics. It was anyone coming into the premises or grounds. So if you were a gardener doing maintenance, gardening, contracting work in a hospital or clinic, you had to be vaccinated. If you were a delivery person, if you were just dropping off supplies and entering the hospital, the goods entrance, you needed to be vaccinated. I mean, if that mandate had gone through, it would have affected millions and millions of people in this country. And the threat of that mandate hanging over my neck, it was one of the most stressful periods, the most stressful time in my life. Yeah. And for those who took the shot and went on with it, they don't really understand. Because for us, we did not want that shot. We did not want that poison inside our body. It's being violated, being raped internally. We just did not want it. It was so stressful. And once it lifted and they said, right, they did a U-turn, right, all right, okay, we're not going to do this mandate business. But we still went through that period for a few months of absolute torture. And so, no, I'm never going to forget. So anyway, do you want to read out some of the things? Because it's all about stories.
Yeah, a couple of short paragraphs that came in on this survey. So one of them says, my husband watched me and my daughter, who was also a teacher, and me cry on an almost daily basis, as I never thought my 40-plus year career, in teaching this is, would end based on a vaccine. My own children had to have 2 shots or lose their jobs. An awful time. As I didn't have a vaccine passport, I was unable to book into a motel, enter a cafe, or partake in my weekly gym sessions. I was so angry. But more than that, I was so very disappointed at how easily those with vaccine passports thought all this was okay. My principal was so keen on all the jabs. She has a lot. My 90-year-old mum was so worried that she would not see me at her retirement village. My sisters thought I was selfish, both being Jacinda supporters. In the end, I did get 1 shot, as I knew that I would need to see my mum before she passed away. I will never forgive or forget how the mandates have affected me. I'm still angry, and if I see or hear any mention of Ardern, Hipkins or Bloomfield, my stomach churns. My biggest fear is that all this will one day happen again, and my life and that of my wonderful family will once again be put through absolute hell. Shocking, isn't it?
Shocking.
So here's a shorter one. Lost a number of close friends and family members, was bullied at my work, and when I left, no one contacted me. Had worked at the same school for 8 years, no farewell, no thank yous. To be forced to leave my little 5-year-olds and not even say goodbye was heartbreaking. Extremely lonely and depressing time. Another one. At the time, it was horrendous. I was in a deep state of depression. Most days leading up to the final day of work, I would go home, lock myself in my room, crying myself to sleep. I lost the majority of my friends, and few colleagues understood my reasoning. Some tried to bully me into getting the jab. I fell out with my brother, who believed I was a terrible person for not getting vaccinated. It was just horrible. My manager came across as very impersonal and acted as though it was just another day of business. And so it goes on.
Keep going. Read more of them.
At times I've been a wreck, some days, and have resulted in days, if not weeks, maybe years now, of depression. I have cried myself to sleep every now and again, and then not only due to the fact that life has been so hard since the mandates, but definitely never felt this way before the mandates. This has been the hardest time of my life, sometimes even questioning why I should be alive. It has become worse lately as the information is coming out, even though it just confirms what we already knew early on, how there still seems to be no acknowledgement of all the hurt that we've been through, or everyone has just got over it because the government vaxxed and never went through what we did, because they got vaxxed and never went through what we did. My relationship with my kids is worse. My relationship with my wife is broken. We've discussed separation in the last month, mainly due to me not being happy with my life. Yeah, it's heartbreaking. Absolutely heartbreaking. So my plan for this survey, I'm working with my colleague, Catherine Pick, who's a wonderful teacher with interest in health, holistic health. The plan is to create a report with the findings that we get from this survey and publish it somewhere. And it will also be submitted to the COVID inquiry, although I'm afraid I'm a bit of a skeptic about the New Zealand COVID inquiry. But, it will still be evidence for the public record when the time comes for some sort of accountability. So
Yeah. I get that.
What are your thoughts about the COVID inquiry in the UK?
Same as you, Ursula. Same as you. You know what? I just I think they're all a whitewash. I think it's all absolute garbage.
Yeah.
It's always framed in a way that you don't challenge the pandemic. It was real.
Yeah.
It was terrible. What could we have done better? And I've always said that it'll come out. You know what? Next time we should just lock down faster, harder, longer, and vaccinate more. It's just that's the agenda. That these inquiries are just garbage, absolute garbage.
Yeah.
Petitions are garbage. It makes no difference. Trying to write letters to these people is garbage. They ignore them. The only good thing about writing letters like Elizabeth Hart has done is there's a paper trail that you can prove that these people knew. For example, she's shown me emails where she's written to Angus saying these vaccines are dangerous. There's no informed consent. You cannot be telling people to take this shot. And a month later, he wrote the Daily Mail article. So she's like, he knew. I told him. He can't say that I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
And she's written to all of them, the politicians, your Chris Whitties, your Valences, she wrote to all of them, your ministers in Australia. She wrote to everybody. So, one of the good things about writing letters and emails is you've got that record that,
Totally.
they knew. Did anybody ever reply to her? No. Did anybody ever acknowledge?
I'm pretty convinced, going back to the Dalgleish thing, I'm pretty convinced that Daily Mail article, he didn't write it as such. His communications department at his university would have written it and put his name to it and basically given him the ultimatum of, you will comply with this or you'll lose your academic position. So
what he said was that the Daily Mail took an interview over the phone and then Ghost wrote that article and put his name on it.
Yeah, no. I don't
You don't think so?
That. No, I think his communications department, his the PR, whatever the name of that part of the university is, the communications, media, marketing, whatever it is, they would have constructed that as a complying with the narrative in order to keep it going.
Well, yeah, I don't know about that, but anyway, I'm just going by what he said, and he said that the Daily Mail wrote the piece for him. It's funny, someone else wrote to me and said the Daily Mail is an intelligence front, and it's just a propaganda arm, and I was like, wow, I never thought of it like that.
They're full of limited hangouts at the moment. It's just one vaccine story after another, just to feed people into believing that it's normal. Yeah, it's pretty sad.
What's next in the list?
The only other thing I was going to talk to you about was something that we mentioned when we were talking the other day about the fluoride event, because the guy, Michael Connett, the US lawyer,
that's it,
who works for the Aaron Siri law firm in the US, he did a major breakthrough in terms of the court case that had been going on for years, decades, with the Environmental Protection Agency in terms of the environmental and the FDA impact on public health with putting fluoride in the drinking water. Yeah, and that was an incredible, because he was on tour in New Zealand, so we couldn't let that happen without going to see him personally. And the hall that he spoke at, just down the road in Cambridge, was absolutely packed, standing room only. Amazing presentation. The guy can just talk and talk and talk.
I know, but what were the key salient points, the take-home messages? So what does fluoride do? What damage does it do to your body? What does it do?
Yeah, well, I was the normie about fluoride up until relatively recently. It was just something that was in the background. I knew vaguely that it was controversial, that there was a group that were against it. We actually don't have fluoride added to our water here, but they are trying to add it. There's other areas around New Zealand that have had it for many, many years. So there's already a potential comparison there that can be made, but of course they won't publish that data. But yeah, his point was basically going through the court case and the judgments that have been made and the propaganda that was spoken by the fluoride industry, how things have been hijacked over the years. And what was interesting from the psychology perspective was there was a dentist in the room, in that audience, who right at the very beginning you could tell was really uncomfortable, and she was shouting at him, like trying to discredit him or discredit the evidence that had changed the direction of the court case and won it in the end for him. So it was quite interesting to witness her anger, that cognitive dissonance where people just are so angry they can't even articulate their argument. There's nothing to be said. There is no argument.
Okay. Well, can I talk about fluoride then?
Go for it.
So fluoride is basically toxic, and it's not healthy. right? It's toxic. And it's basically most of the fluoride that's manufactured in this world is as a byproduct of aluminium manufacturing.
That's right. Yeah.
So it's a massive waste byproduct. And like everything in this sick capitalist system, they're like, well, how can we profit from this? We've got all this fluoride. What are we going to do with it? And then someone went, well, why don't we put it in toothpaste and water and say it's good for your bones? And then, they flew with that one. So a lot of people take the fluoride in the toothpaste. And if you look at toothpaste, it says, do not ingest. And if you do, contact your toxicology center.
Yep.
And just think about how much toothpaste your little kids actually swallow, how much toothpaste you're putting in your mouth, and you can absorb from your mouth. That's why you have sublingual things put underneath your tongue, and it will absorb a tablet. So fluoride gets into your body, and it's a poison. You can also get fluoride in things that are, that absorb fluoride, like tea plants. So if you drink lots of tea, that can have, and coffee, that can have fluoride in it. And some things like shellfish concentrate fluoride. I'm just giving my daughter a kiss. She's just came to the studio. So fluoride is a toxin. It's a poison.
Yes.
It lowers your IQ at least by 10 points. And there is now research showing that it's linked to autism as well. And that's what this guy in the live stream is going to be talking about next week. And I think autism is caused by lots of different things, not just vaccines. So fluoride is not good. It's a poison, and we've accepted it as something that's good for us because this is the inverted world that we live in.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting from a New Zealand perspective because quite often the knowledge is lacking. They're about 20, 25 years behind the science, right, with lots of things like pesticides. And so fluoride, as you know, a few years ago, people honestly believed that ingesting it was good for your bones, for your teeth, right? That was a good thing to do. And then, of course, they recognised that no, it's not a good idea to ingest it. But topical application, oh yeah, that's good. So put it topically on your teeth, and then that will supposedly improve your teeth. But of course, you can't control how much and what the control group is, and you don't know what the impact of having it topically over the long term or even to the unborn child. And now this court case has proved it's a fantastic piece of case law in the US, where they have actually proved that I think the wording in the judgment is it's an unreasonable risk. And so if something is an unreasonable risk, especially to children, then don't take it. It's quite simple. Don't put it in the drinking water, because if it's topical anyway, why would you put it in something that people are going to drink? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It's totally back to front. The cognitive dissonance of trying to get the logic is incredible, really. But we're getting the message out there. I mean, people are waking up to this. It's an incredible side issue to the whole COVID fraud thing, is that people are actually waking up to the facts. It's not a natural product. It is, as you say, a toxic chemical byproduct.
Yeah. Aluminium fluoride is a byproduct of aluminium production. It's a white, odorless, crystalline powder, right? And it's also a byproduct of fertilizer production. It's a byproduct of iron ore production. Uranium, component of emissions from uranium processing facilities, as a component of wastewater from factories that produce glass, pesticides, and chemicals. I mean, just listen to all of that. Does that sound like something you want to put in your toothpaste? Seriously?
No.
Like, does that sound like, I'm going to put this in my toothpaste? 70% of the US has fluoride in their water, right? And I love this. Here we go. It's a byproduct of the manufacturing process. Big business lucked out by convincing local municipalities to buy their fluoride. I mean, they say byproduct, but waste byproduct, off them for cheap.
Yeah.
Now they have an easy solution to offload their extra fluoride and are getting paid for it. The sodium fluoride added by our municipalities has no nutritional value or health benefits and is an unnatural form of fluoride. It is a chemical byproduct of aluminium, steel, cement, phosphate, and the nuclear weapons manufacturing. Before the public was convinced that adding fluoride to their water was for their own good, the metal and chemical industries had the problem of disposing of their highly toxic fluoride waste. Now, thanks to corporate lobbyists and the big lie sold to the public about supposed health benefits, the fluoride waste is dumped into municipal water supplies. Not only did they solve their toxic waste disposal problem, but they allowed them to sell it for a profit at a markup of 20,000 times.
Yeah.
20,000. And what's it related to? It can cause hyperactivity, lethargy, arthritis, lower thyroid function, lowered IQ, dementia, disrupted immune system, genetic damage, cell death, cancers, reduced lifespan. And I also should mention, I forgot to mention this, that the fluoride competes for your iodine as well. So, you lose your iodine and that causes a whole host of medical problems. It's bad stuff, Ursula.
It is
bad
very
shit.
bad stuff. Yeah.
Hi, me again. You're listening to the Doc Malik podcast. This show is 100% independent and fully funded by listeners like yourself. So if you wish to support Ahmed in all that he is doing, then please subscribe to his channel on Spotify or on his Substack, or simply buy him a coffee with one of the donation links which can be found at docmalik.com. Now, let's get back to the show.
But again, you see, they've used that corporate playbook. They know how to manipulate the academics. They're totally indoctrinated these dental students from the very beginning. Nobody thinks to actually read the literature. Where are the conflicts of interest? It's just an assumption with no critical thinking skills at all. It's incredible, really. And it's the same playbook over and over and over again.
I think this is a good way to link back to what we started off with. And then we'll do the final signature question. But basically, let's go back to PubMed. And you just look at, you just search PubMed, fluoride dental decay. I've spelled that wrong. The role of fluoride on caries prevention, fluoridated water impact on tooth decay, blah, blah, blah. And if you just click any one of these, just start off, review finds that fluoride is the key to prevention and control of tooth decay.
Yeah.
There are multiple fluoride modalities with effectiveness and safety of fluoride. Goes on and on. It's just everything you read, it'll be promoting fluoride. And this is the corruption of science, isn't it?
Yeah, because if you look at that paper and you see the conflicts of interest from those authors, you'll find that either them personally or their department has benefited from big chem, i.e. fluoride funding.
I mean, look at this one. Look at this one. Greater fluoride exposure and lowered caries prevalence are considered to be one of the greatest accomplishments in 20th century public dental health.
Yeah, like vaccines.
Right. So and then look, acute toxicity can occur after ingesting one or more doses of fluoride, leads to poisoning. And then it says, conclusion, even though fluoride can be toxic in extremely high concentrations, its topical use is safe. It's safe. It's just when you actually read it, when you read their stuff, it's just so full of shiitake mushrooms. Shiitake. It's unbelievable. And it just goes on.
That links to the Milgram experiment thing, doesn't it? People trust the experts. They trust the professional societies. They'll do whatever they're told to do.
So what I'm saying is, look at the PubMed. I'm going and going. It's all about one research paper after another, talking about how great fluoride is. When you and I have just seen what a toxic shiitake it is, right? And they're going on about, it's just BS. Now if we say PubMed, fluoride, not safe, what comes up? And it goes, straight away, today poisoning is mainly due to unsupervised ingestion of products for dental and oral hygiene and over-fluoridated water. Even though fluoride can be toxic, its topical use it's come up with that same garbage line. And, there's not much, let's just see what comes up.
It's the same with the 1080, safe and effective, best tool in the toolbox. It's a natural product. It's very rare that there's any adverse events. It's just the same copy and paste of the propaganda. It's incredible, really.
So look at this one. Currently, there is wide access to knowledge about fluoride, which unfortunately opens the door to the propagation of false information. Fluoride in optimal amounts is an element that has a positive effect on the functioning of living organisms. Correct dosing is well known and documented. Blah, 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 blah. So basically, you and I are clearly spreaders of misinformation.
Misinformation.
Do you see what I mean? It's just...
Yeah. We're up against a machine, and it's a very powerful machine that has got unlimited funds. And if we're targeted with all kinds of labels, some people might believe them and other people won't. But what can you do other than just keep telling the truth and keep encouraging people to actually read and develop their own critical thinking skills, and become aware of propaganda theory and other strategies that people use to manipulate. Like, I've just had another article published today, actually, in Propaganda in Focus, about the subliminal messages that they used in some of the supermarkets here in New Zealand with the beeps. I don't know if you got those in England. Did you get those over the loudspeaker? They like beep, 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 like to kind of jolt people into thinking, oh my God, I've got to remember to physically distance and stand on the yellow circles when I'm in a queue or whatever.
No. Oh, wow. That's very dystopian.
Very. Yeah. And it was all paid for by the government. You know, they behind closed doors, Jacinda and her cronies all got together with the senior managers at the 5 or 6 biggest commercial companies and came to an arrangement about how they were going to coerce the population into taking the jabs. And yeah.
Why is no one, I know why, but it really annoys me that your Gates, your Fauci's, your Jacindas, your Borises, your Matt Hancocks, your Chris Whitties, your Valencies, your Morrisons, you name it. Why are none of them behind bars?
Yeah.
I mean, I had a great comment from one of my supporters who said, Ahmed, you know what? The reason why I didn't give that guy Angus his due respect, and I had, quite a lot of contempt for him, was it's all BS. Ahmed, I'm just a tradesman. I'm a brickie. I've got no qualifications. And I had enough common sense to say this is absolute BS, and I got no names, no letters after my name, right? And I could see through the whole shabam, and it was garbage, right? Yeah. I'm sorry, why couldn't these people with their fancy titles and credentials not see it? I just don't buy it. It's garbage.
Yeah.
And, the corruption of science is more than just wokeism and, political correctness. I find this agenda quite common. So if you listen to people like Jordan Peterson, Chris Constantine, trigonometry, Douglas Murray, other people, GB News, these right-wing kind of like commentators that are reacting to apparently the WEF, all the people that come on the arc, they'll be like, oh, the problem that we see today is the left and the woke and the immigration and this and that. And if we just sort out the nonsense of trans and wokeism and the left, then everything's going to be fine. We need to lurch to the right, and then, all the problems will be sorted. And it's like, it's just a game they're playing because it's absolute garbage. No, yes, of course, immigration is rampant and uncontrolled, but it's not a clash of civilizations. That's not the issue. The question is, who's bringing them here? Who's bringing them to the countries? Who's manufacturing the chaos in the other countries and the wars and profiting from the misery and then importing all these people? Who are the real people doing that? And actually, if you look, it's the Western intelligence, Five Eyes, Six Eyes, and the people behind them who own them. Because these governments and countries are owned by people. We think we live in a democratic society. It's not. We think our politicians serve us. They don't. And this idea that actually all the problems are, like Angus was saying in his book, the problem of academia is wokeism and political correctness. Yeah, that's a big problem. 100%, I agree. But that's not the only problem. The problem is much deeper and nuanced, and you're just playing this framing Hegelian dialect where it's this and that. And no, it's not. It's a lot bigger than that. And that's what I think. And I think one of the tells is when someone just bangs on about, immigration, we need to sort out immigration. And that's all they talk about. And they don't talk about the mRNA jabs, or they don't talk about stakeholder capitalism and communitarianism and the other, and digital ID and digital twin cities and nanotech and everything. I'm like, you know what? You're either knowingly or unknowingly acting as an agent for the other side. Is that unfair?
No, totally. I mean, one of the speeches that I heard today at the ARC conference, I think it was Farage, talking about how many more people there are on welfare benefits, disability welfare benefits in the UK now compared to a few years ago. Well, isn't it obvious? It's majority of that is probably vaccine injuries, either mental or physical or both. But of course, they don't mention the elephant in the room. They can't mention that. That's totally off limits. They've got to stick to the approved narrative, which is the anti-woke, neoconservative kind of, and it pulls people in. It pulls some people in. It's understandable. It's what some people want to hear. They don't want to hear the extent of the fraud, the global catastrophe that we're in. But we're here now. We've moved on. We're 5 years into this World War III, and we are winning. We are winning.
Really? Wow. That's very optimistic. Why do you think we're winning? Because if you speak to Amin Jabi, he came on my podcast, he said, if you look at every field in this world, we are losing. Science, media, journalism, politics, healthcare. He goes, we're losing. They're marching relentlessly forward with their agenda. This one world prison planet. So what makes you think we're winning?
I'm a grassroots optimist, and I speak to ordinary, diverse people every day in New Zealand, and without doubt, there are people who are asking questions. For instance, I had somebody the other day I bumped into, and he was a teacher who was mandated, who took the jab, regretted it, and he kept his job. And I said to him, after I'd sort of been diplomatic and got a bit of information out, I said to him, have you actually spoken to because obviously there were teachers at your school who were mandated out. Have you spoken to them since they left? And he suddenly went very quiet and thought and said, no, actually, you're right. I need to contact them. I need to make sure they're okay, don't I? And I'm like, yeah, you fucking do, mate. Well, they were your colleagues for years. Have some basic humanity and compassion, and God knows what's happened to those people now. Some of those people, God forbid.
I've actually, that resonates with me because I've worked with so many doctors, hundreds, and physios and other healthcare workers. Do you know what? 2 people reached out to me to say, are you okay? What's happened to you? And I recently bumped into one of my anaesthetists that I used to work with every week for years. And he couldn't look me in the eye. Oh, Ahmed, sorry, I haven't been in touch. Sorry. Are you okay? I was like, yeah, I'm great. Better than great. And I mean that, Ursula. Like, seriously, I am in such a good place. You know that. I was telling you this earlier. I'm so happy. I've got so many beautiful, wonderful supporters, and my life is great. And he was like, okay, well, I'm so glad to hear you're okay. And he didn't know what to say. No. And then I went, all right, don't worry about it, mate. It's all good. And he just walked off.
Yeah, I mean, from a psychology perspective, that was probably good that you did that you said that you were okay, because I think some of the fear that these people have got of knowing the truth is that they assume that, somehow our lives are totally finished and we're broken people and we're somehow ashamed to be who we are. When actually, if anything, it's further embedded our confidence and our self-esteem and our identity as ethical practitioners, whether that's education or medicine or whatever, hasn't it? With all the trauma and everything, I mean, I'm sure lots of people say this, I still wouldn't have traded it in not to live through this era. It's an incredible time to be alive, as my colleague Michael would say. It is, and we're very lucky in some ways to have connected. I mean, we would never have known each other. There's so many friends and networks and stuff that we've learned over the years that we would never have even thought of 5 years ago.
It's half term. I took my kids out this week into central London, showing them some of the sights, Big Ben and whatnot. We're walking around the streets. I haven't done this for a long time, ever, because they weren't old enough and my wife is working. So I don't want really young kids. So they're now at an age where I thought, right, I'll show them around a bit, like London Eye and this and that. But the thing is, around me, everywhere I saw, I was so disappointed. People are very, very overweight, constantly eating junk food, drinking energy drinks, vaping. Yeah. Women are like plastered with makeup. You can see the rim of foundation, this orangey color, and then their pale skin, or Asian women with very pale foundation against their darker skin. I mean, it's just everyone's wearing a mask, heavy makeup, and it's just, I just feel like people don't love who they really are. Yeah. People are eating and drinking poisons, and I just feel like, I'm like, does anyone here really know what's going on? Does anyone know like what's happening? And I don't know, maybe being in central London isn't the best place to be for that.
No, I mean, to be fair, it's the same if I go into central Auckland, similar kind of environment. People that live in very built up areas certainly are more likely to be indoctrinated compared to more rural areas.
And I forgot to mention, everyone's on their phone. All the children are on their phone. Children are on their screen. No one's talking to each other. They're all seeing life through the lens of a screen.
Yeah, it's very sad. Very, very sad.
Very dystopian. Anyway, so
Anyway,
let's move on. Yeah. Last question of the day. And then it's going to be your bedtime. And I'm going to go for a nice K run in the woods with the missies.
I've got to take my little puppy for a walk before I go to bed.
Oh, that's nice. Well, I've got a day off with the wife today, and we get to have some time together.
Oh,
anyway,
that's cool. Yeah.
Ursula.
Yes.
Wife of the beautiful Justin. I just had to drop that in. Beautiful Justin. My twin. Look, you're on your deathbed. Could be next week. Could be 50 years from now. Before you pass on and meet your maker, what words of wisdom and advice would you give to your loved ones?
Yeah. So I have answered this before in our first conversation, which was at the very beginning of your journey. I think I said something along the lines of just follow your heart, which is probably the most common, response that you get. So definitely be true to yourself, follow your heart. Something that I would add now is the importance of writing things down, because we do need to get off our phones, as you've just said, get everybody off their phones. And we do need to read more physical books, but we also need to write down, these experiences that we're having, because without the record of people like Victor Klemperer, who wrote his diaries during the World War II, the run up to World War II, and during his experiences of the Holocaust as a Jew in Germany. And he was an academic, by the way. He was a professor at the University of Dresden. So he's got some very interesting insights into how those egos can take over and prevent people from seeing and speaking truth. So write your thoughts down, capture them for the next generation so that they know what we're living through. And here's an idea for you personally, Ahmed, is that maybe all of these responses, you should collate them and put them into a book, because all of these podcasts, you've asked this question of all, some very important people far more important than me, important protagonists in this World War III we're living through. And I think it could be useful to document, the responses to this important question for the future generations.
It's the plan.
It's a plan. Fantastic.
Yeah, so I'm currently working on Doc Malik's Simple Guide to Good Health, because just walking through London and seeing everything, some people might be like, oh my God, this is so obvious. Well, the book's not for you then, is it? It's for the people who are obese and overweight and sick and anxious and don't know how they got there, and are going to the gym and doing the exercise and eating what their doctor tells them to, but are still sick. That's who the book's for. So that's and then once I've done that, then I'll do the Advanced Guide to Good Health, which will have more references and more details about certain things. And then the other one that I want to do is exactly what you've just said. And several of my listeners have recommended that, messages from the deathbed or wisdom from the deathbed or whatever.
Yes.
So that's that. Definitely we'll do that as well.
Excellent. That's what I like to hear. Yeah.
Yeah, it's going to happen. And one day, maybe if anyone's interested, I might do, an autobiography type thing. My journey through life. It's quite interesting. A lot of people, there's still tons that people don't know about. I mean, I've lived a really interesting life. That's why I don't mind. If tomorrow I die, I'm not scared of death. People say to me, oh, but what about your children? I was like, do you know what? They've got 300 episodes where they can watch and listen to me ratting on. They'll know who their dad is. And I've told them that I'll live within them forever. I'm not worried about that. I know people who've lost their parents at a young age. One of them is my brother-in-law. And he's a beautiful soul. And you know what? Everything works out. It'll be fine. Yeah. It'll work out. It will all be okay. Yeah. So, all these books, I need to get on with them. But it's just busy churning out the podcast. I've just passed 300 mark. It's not even been 2 years.
Fantastic. Yeah, amazing. Congratulations.
Yeah, thanks. But I need to roll it back, because in April, I will officially be offering consultations. The website's just been prepared and done for that. But I haven't launched it yet because I've been rammed with podcasts. So I'm cutting back now so that I can give time to do consultations. And that's to help guide people through the sick care system. I won't be offering diagnoses or treatments. I'll just be offering education and advice to help people navigate through this mess. And then I also want to run some courses. I've got lots of different ideas, like, again, how to be healthy, how to set up a successful podcast, because I think we need more independent voices behind the scene. Then I also want to do a course on how to run a successful private practice. Good people, whether you're a massage therapist or a homeopathy or, osteopath or a surgeon, if you're an ethical one, I can tell you how to run a very successful practice. So I've got courses, books, consultations. I'm going to be running retreats. Just busy because it's got so much on the plate. And that's why also it's very exciting. It's exciting, Ursula. This is fun.
It is, I know. Yeah. I mean, that's the good thing about the era that we're in is anything is possible. One of the things I'm doing is running some, which I'm planning to do more of, community workshops where I'll be teaching people about propaganda theory. I do a workshop where it's based on the book, How to Break Up with Your Phone, to get people off their phones. Because it's an addiction, right? It's a physical addiction. So they need to learn how to overcome those addictions with tried and trusted strategies. I think we're all finding new ways of creating our professional identity and helping people and moving forward. So that's good. Positive.
Beautiful. Right. Tell people where they can find you once more, although all your information will be in the show notes, but just once more.
So my academic work is on academia.edu. My professional consultation website is just ursulaedgington.com. And my blog, which I update at least once a week, is at Substack under Informed Heart. Substack.com, Informed Heart. You can subscribe for free, by the way. I don't charge anybody. Although I do have some very kind people who do buy me coffees and subscribe when they don't need to, and that obviously helps because I just pay it forward to people that I'm helping, and to things like this survey that we're doing for the teachers that were mandated out. That helps pay for my research databases and the platform that we use to keep the secure responses and things like that. So thank you very much to my subscribers, and thank you, Ahmed, for helping me spread the word and raise awareness about these important issues, and keep on doing a great job.
My pleasure. I, Ahmed Malik, am a private civilian protected by the Geneva Convention. My Substack, social media posts and podcasts are my personal experiences, observations and opinions. This information is for educational purposes only. Although I am a doctor, I am not your doctor, and I am not providing medical or legal advice to you or to the wider public. I am not licensed or registered with the GMC or any other licensing board. The responsibility for the interpretation, due diligence and use of the information from my Substack and my podcast lies with you, the viewer and or listener. Please do your research and use your your discernment. It is not my intention to harass, intimidate, offend, defame, conspire, blackmail, coerce, or cause anxiety, alarm, or distress to any man or woman, and the information presented here is done so with peaceful and honourable intentions. Enjoy, folks.